Until next time. February 17, 2025 marks year 4 and day 297 since the full-scale invasion began. A warm welcome, I greet you, to the Daily Situation Report. Today's report highlights Ukrainian drone strikes deep in Russia, fires at industrial and energy sites, and rising economic pressure on Russia, distorted portrayals on Russian propaganda channels, as well as failed Russian attack attempts, and of course ongoing personnel attrition at the front, as well as much more. Ukrainian long-range drones attacked a Russian oil depot in Slavyansk na Kuvani. It is 400 kilometers from the border, and the nearby facility processes 5.2 million tons of crude oil each year. The facility's storage was hit, and as usual, local residents recorded and published it. This war is one of the most well-documented wars. Just think about how long it took, for example, during World War I to gather information, process it, share it, validate it, and publish it. Today, everyone records events on their phones and shares them within seconds. Then, using tools like Google Maps, satellite images, and topographic maps, you can geolocate the recordings and then make them available to the general public just a few hours later. That wouldn't have even been possible just a few years ago. We can also take the Gulf Wars as an example. In the Russian city of Kemerovo, there was a major fire on the premises. Pyotr Koks, the largest coke and chemical company in the region, which produces metallurgical coke for use in blast furnaces. A drone attack has not been reported so far. So, apart from a technical defect or poor maintenance, we can even expect sabotage, which of course cannot be ruled out, especially when we see how often something like this happens. Because coke is vital for steel and defense industries, a long production outage would have significant operational impact. The United States government under Trump is preparing new sanctions against the Russian energy sector. Now that's really interesting. According to Reuters, who refer to Bloomberg and cite confidential sources, the measures could come into effect as early as next week. Unfortunately, with a big could. Well, I think they will happen, especially after the conversation with Merz, Zelensky, and Witkow a few days ago. But for that, Putin must not be allowed to speak with Trump by phone first. They talk on the phone privately. Otherwise, nothing will happen again. The planned sanctions are intended to target the so-called Russian shadow fleet in particular, as well as trading and brokerage companies that Russia uses to transport and sell raw materials to international buyers. The latter is particularly interesting. Sanctioning such companies is always somewhat easier than the shadow fleet, because the shadow fleet, which, well, how should I put it? Russia simply takes the ships that are sanctioned, renames them, and lets them sail under a different flag. The goal is still to further restrict existing circumvention mechanisms and to put real pressure on Russia's energy exports, since they are among the main sources of income for the war. Germany and Great Britain want to support Ukraine a bit more and basically deliver additional air defense systems. Let's see what the Russian propaganda channels say about this, because they have an interesting way of thinking, which unfortunately also reminds us of the logic of many people here. With over 1 million subscribers, they recently presented a remarkably simple conclusion. Since Germany and Great Britain are supplying Ukraine with air defense systems to protect civilians from Russian missile and drone attacks, London and Berlin are therefore, quote, obviously preparing for a war with Russia. The logic of the argument follows a familiar propaganda pattern. Defensive support measures are reinterpreted as aggressive intent, while the cause, that is, the ongoing Russian attacks on civilian targets, is completely ignored. In this view, just defending against missile attacks makes one a party to the war. A defensive alliance like NATO is called offensive, and building defensive lines on the eastern flank is labeled Russophobic. It's like handing someone a shield and then accusing him of being the attacker while the sword is beside him. Russians captured Serebrianka, the area between it and Siversk, and the region south of Siversk. So basically here, this large area here. As stated in my previous reports, I believe this area had long been under Russian control. There was little geolocation, but now the Ukrainian side has confirmed this area is under Russian control. That's why I was able to mark it that way in good conscience. That means the Ukrainians haven't declared Siversk lost yet, But as I said, the green pins are geolocations that I have shown before, which have shown that Russian soldiers are already here. I assume, and I'm pretty sure about this, that Siversk has already fallen 2 or 3 days ago. Now it's about the areas next to it, and the whole thing is pushing a bit further. Some Russian geolocations have reappeared here. They will start here now, wanting to gain ground, and will continue to advance from here towards Shakirn if they want to keep pushing forward through this area. The Ukrainians definitely have the advantage of higher ground if they are here. We'll see that again in the next situation report when I go into more detail about this area. Because, as you can easily see on the map, this is quite a hilly area. But what's even more interesting than here is Pokrovsk. There is still fighting going on in Pokrovsk. Here, Russia tried to change the situation around Pokrovsk, but failed. They tried to break out beyond the access roads of the city. So basically here, along this road to reach Cherishna, and along this road to close the pocket here. One of the two attacks was recorded, because after costly frontal assaults, Russian forces chose an alternative approach and sent a mobile column of supply vehicles and light buggies toward Cherishne. This is the attack I just talked about, which was carried out in this direction here. The aim was to bypass Ukrainian positions and threaten supply routes, but Ukrainian drone pilots monitored the area throughout. Geolocated footage shows the convoy was attacked only 1 kilometer after departing. Several vehicles were hit almost simultaneously, which indicates a prepared drone coverage of the area of movement. That's also clear. Reports say 10 vehicles were destroyed and about 40 soldiers died. Some of the surviving forces continued the advance on foot, but they couldn't spread out enough and were then attacked by first-person view drones. According to the Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief Serebrianka, there are about 155,000 Russian soldiers in this area. The question I'm asking myself is why? The Russians, at one of the largest and most fiercely contested sections of the entire front, where there is an incredible density of drones, are trying to break through with a column from a city towards the Ukrainians. That hasn't worked at all for at least a year now. Since then, they've had all these kill zones and they have countless drones. That's a total suicide mission, but it was already that way before. Remember the endlessly long convoys at the start of the invasion. It was already so foolish then. I wonder what's going on in the heads of Russian commanders, because it's not like they don't know any better. They were able to capture Pokrovsk by sending in many inconspicuous and small infiltration squads into the city so that Ukrainian drone operators could hardly detect and fight them. Then they captured 90% of the city and did exactly what leads to failure. Why? As a result, they lose all their equipment and many soldiers. The Ukrainians can be glad about these decisions, as they continue to be made. This kind of attrition leads to these videos. Attention, you're about to watch a top-secret recording of a new Russian transportation method. But why? Because they sacrificed all the good stuff at the front in really pointless attacks. We can continue now. Are you familiar with the I Want to Live project? It's not related to welfare or charity, but if you're looking for a charity campaign, I can only recommend my current one for Ukraine in Berlin. You can help buy wounded transport vehicles using the PayPal link or bank details at the top of the video description. But let's get back to the topic. I Want to Live. This is a Ukrainian project that ultimately ensures that Russian deserters can flee to the Ukrainian side without being accidentally shot by Ukrainian soldiers. So they coordinate with the soldiers on the ground to create a safe situation, a secure corridor, and a meeting point to help them escape. And of course, you also get a lot of interesting information about the Russian side, which the deserters naturally know as well. And this project publishes them again. It's exactly these kinds of publications we're talking about now. Specifically, it's about the casualty numbers of the 810th Marine Infantry Brigade, which has been involved in dangerous offensives and main assaults again for about a year and a half. In the Russian army, it's already nicknamed the Meat Grinder Unit. And if soldiers from other units are already saying that about another unit they don't even know personally, then you can imagine how serious the situation must be. In 2022 alone, according to the project, the brigade lost nearly 85% of its personnel. That was in the first year of the war. Those are extreme losses, even before we experienced all the meat grinder assaults, the battle for Bakhmut and Diivka and so on. So at a time when Ukraine wasn't even supported by the West as much as it is now. In 2024, it was deployed again to fill gaps in the Kursk area. You know the losses, where they repeatedly sent soldiers into completely pointless offensive operations. The majority of the 2014 fallen who have been identified so far also come from this period. And I want to repeat, these are the identified fallen who could be assigned to this brigade. The real number is much higher. Also that year, this project received 1,708 inquiries from Russian relatives searching for missing brigade family members. The losses all occurred under the command of Oleg Vlasov, who, despite the high casualties, was promoted to general and awarded the title Hero of Russia by Putin. According to reports, soldiers were sent into attacks even when they were wounded or could only move with difficulty. Hero of Russia. Just think about that for a moment. How can someone who sacrifices his own people at the front become a hero of Russia? It's simple because military competence and the individual don't matter within the Russian army. Only loyalty to the Kremlin and the president matters. People often criticize Russian generals and leadership, saying many are incompetent. And that may be true to a large extent, but it usually doesn't apply to those in the position to assess the attacks. It's for everyone to inventory, targetonize with. Again, he also reported profits. So what did the Russians do with him? He was locked up for recognizing problems at the front and publicly filing a complaint with the Ministry of Defense. A capable military man is gone, replaced by someone who makes no difference at the front. At most, a difference in casualties. And as I said, Ukraine was especially lucky at the beginning of the invasion that the Russians kept shooting themselves in the foot. And if the Russians keep this up, then at least in this aspect, it's very good for Ukraine. Special thanks to Algin Crew channel members, especially Colonel Drenica, Robert, Zilla, and Dietrich. As always, thank you for listening. Subscribe, like, comment, and see you in the next report.